I never imagined the words "crazy granny" would be hurled at me, least of all by my own son, in the very kitchen where I'd baked his birthday cakes for 40 years. But there he stood, my Michael, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, his gaze skittering away from mine, while his wife, Serena, watched with an expression I can only describe as predatory satisfaction. They told me I was a burden, that my mind was slipping, that it was time for a change for my own good. Little did they know, the crazy granny they were so eager to discard was about to become their most astute financial lesson, and my own unexpected, profound liberation. I suppose, in the end, they weren't entirely wrong. I was crazy. Crazy to have given so much, for so long, without question. That, at least, was about to change. Tell me, where in the world are you watching this from? I'd love to know. And if this story resonates with you, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more like it. Stick around till the end, it's quite a journey. My name is Eleanor Vance, and for 62 years, I believed in the sanctity of family, in the unconditional nature of a mother's love. My late husband, Arthur, and I had built a comfortable life, not extravagant, but solid. He was an engineer, careful and clever, and I was a teacher, nurturing and patient. We poured everything into our son, Michael. Our home, a sturdy two-story colonial with a sprawling garden Arthur had lovingly tended, was more than just bricks and mortar. It was the repository of our lives, our dreams, our sacrifices. After Arthur passed from a sudden heart attack 10 years ago, the house felt too big, too quiet, but it was my anchor, my connection to him, to us. Michael was already married to Serena by then, a woman who, if I'm honest, always set my teeth on edge with her saccharine smiles and grasping eyes, but I'd kept my reservations to myself. For Michael's sake. A mother learns to do that. Over the years, I'd helped them. More than helped, really. When they wanted a down payment for their first apartment, I liquidated some bonds Arthur had left. When Michael's first business venture failed, a trendy coffee shop Serena had insisted was a goldmine, I used a chunk of my retirement savings to bail them out, to keep the creditors from their door. Serena had wept dramatically, thanking me, calling me their savior. Michael had just looked relieved and slightly ashamed. Each time, they promised it was the last time. Each time, I chose to believe them. Love, I've learned, can be a formidable blinder. The house was paid off, my teacher's pension was modest but adequate, and I had Arthur's life insurance, which I managed carefully. Or so I thought. The day it all shattered began like any other. I was pruning Arthur's roses, my hands covered in dirt, my heart relatively content. Serena's car, a sleek black SUV I vaguely recalled them mentioning was a company car from Michael's new, vague consulting job, pulled into my driveway. They didn't call. They rarely did anymore, unless they needed something. Serena emerged first, dressed in an outfit that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Michael followed, looking more stressed than usual. "Mom," Michael started, his voice strained, as I wiped my hands on my apron. "We need to talk." Inside, at the old oak table where countless family meals had been shared, Serena did most of the talking. Michael just stared at his hands. "Eleanor," she began, her tone dripping with false concern, "Michael and I have been so worried about you. Living alone in this big house, it's not safe. And, well, you're not getting any younger." I felt a chill despite the warm spring air. "I'm perfectly fine, Serena. This house is my home." "We know, dear," she said, patting my hand with fingers that felt like ice. "But we've found a lovely little place for you. A senior apartment. Much more manageable. And it would mean we could, well, this house is a lot of capital tied up." My blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" Michael finally looked up, his eyes pleading and weak. Mom, we need to sell the house. We have an opportunity, a big one. But we need capital. And this house, it's in my name now, remember? After Dad passed, you signed it over to help with estate planning, remember? I did remember, vaguely. The lawyer, a friend of Serena's family, had said it was simpler, would avoid probate. I'd trusted them. Trusted Michael. The scale of my naivety hit me like a physical blow. But it's my home, Michael. I have nowhere else to go. My pension, it's not enough for rent and living expenses if I don't have the house. Serena's smile was tight. That's where the crazy granny part comes in, Eleanor, she said, her voice losing its syrupy sweetness and taking on a sharp, dismissive edge. You've been getting so forgetful. Confused. We are just looking out for you. Honestly, the things you say sometimes, it's clear you can't manage on your own. We have power of attorney for your finances too, just to help you out. It's for the best. Crazy Granny. The words echoed in the familiar kitchen. My kitchen. My son stood by, silent, complicit. My world tilted. I had poured my life, my resources, my love into this boy, this family. And for what? To be deemed insane and disposable. The betrayal was a chasm opening at my feet. I felt my dignity shredding, my heart fracturing into a million pieces. I tried to argue, to plead, but my voice was weak, trembling. They had an answer for everything, a condescending platitude, a veiled threat about my declining mental state. They left a brochure for the Golden Acres senior residence on the table. It looked like a prison. My home, Arthur's home, was to be sold out from under me by my own child, to fund their ambitions, and I was to be warehoused, labeled a crazy old woman. The shock was a physical weight, pressing the air from my lungs. I felt utterly, terrifyingly erased. The days that followed were a blow of grief and disbelief. They moved quickly, efficiently. Serena supervised the packing of a few of my belongings, mostly old clothes and sentimental trinkets of no monetary value. She handled the real estate agent, a brisk woman with a painted smile who appraised my beloved home with cold, calculating eyes. Michael made himself scarce. When I did see him, he couldn't meet my gaze, muttering about how this was for the best and how they would visit all the time. Liar. The carefully tended garden, Arthur's roses, the swing set where Michael had played as a boy, all of it was to be sold, commodified, erased. Golden Acres was worse than the brochure. It smelled of disinfectant and despair. My room was tiny, a bed, a dresser, a small window overlooking a patch of withered grass. The other residents shuffled by with vacant eyes, or sat staring at flickering television screens. The vibrant tapestry of my life, woven with love and sacrifice, had been reduced to this drab, threadbare square. I was financially crippled. They controlled my pension through the power of attorney, doling out a pittance that barely covered the incidentals Golden Acres didn't provide. My home, which I later found out sold quickly for a very handsome sum, was gone. The proceeds, I knew, were already fueling Michael and Serena's big opportunity. In that sterile room, I descended into a despair so profound it felt like drowning. I replayed my life, searching for the misstep, the moment I could have changed this outcome. Had I loved Michael too much? Given too freely? Had Arthur and I shielded him from the harsh realities of life, creating an adult ill-equipped for responsibility, easily swayed by a manipulative partner? I remembered his childhood, his sweet nature, his easy laugh. Where had that boy gone? Serena's influence, I realized, had been a slow, insidious poison, isolating Michael from old friends, from me, making him dependent on her approval, her vision of success. The sacrifices came back to me in waves of bitter memory. The inheritance from my own mother used to pay for Michael's expensive university degree, a degree he barely used. The times I'd gone without, so he and Serena could have a lavish wedding, a newer car, a fancier vacation. Each memory was a fresh stab of pain. I had given them everything, and in return, they had stripped me of my home, my security, my dignity, and branded me crazy. The label was the cruelest cut. It was designed to silence me, to invalidate any protest I might make. For a while, it worked. I felt invisible, worthless. What was the point of fighting when your own son believed you were a mad old woman? I tried calling Michael a few times. Serena usually answered, her voice brisk and impatient. "Eleanor, he's very busy." "Is it important?" My attempts to discuss my situation were met with sighs and deflections. "We are doing what's best for you, Eleanor. You just need to adjust once." Michael did come to the phone. His voice was hollow. "Mom, please. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. We are trying to build a future." "Whose future, Michael?" I wanted to scream. "Certainly not mine. He promised to visit soon. He never came." The isolation was a heavy blanket, suffocating me. I ate little. I spoke to no one. Rock bottom wasn't a sudden crash, it was a slow, grinding descent into a grey abyss. I would look in the small, clouded mirror in my tiny bathroom and see a stranger, old, defeated, and yes, perhaps a little crazy with grief. The reflection seemed to whisper Serena's taunt back at me. Then, one bleak afternoon, as I was listlessly sorting through the small box of papers they'd allowed me to keep, old bills, sentimental cards, things of no conceivable value to them, my fingers brushed against a thick, forgotten envelope tucked at the very bottom. It was addressed to Arthur, from a law firm I didn't recognize, postmarked nearly 15 years ago. Curious, though with little hope, I slid it open. Inside were documents, complex and jargon-filled, pertaining to a small, speculative investment Arthur had made in a tech startup. I remembered him mentioning it once, excitedly, years before he passed. He'd said it was a long shot, a bit of a gamble with some fun money. I'd forgotten all about it. The startup had a peculiar name, Innovatech Solutions. I'd assumed, like so many such ventures, it had probably folded long ago. Tucked within the legal documents was a more recent statement, or rather, a series of them, forwarded over the years to our old address, then apparently rerouted by someone at the post office with a general forwarding order I must have put in place after Arthur died, before Michael and Serena had fully taken over my affairs. These newer statements were not from Innovatech Solutions, but from a large multinational tech conglomerate, Global Core Dynamics. It seemed Innovatech had been acquired. And then, another acquisition, and another. The original small investment, a few $1,000s Arthur had scraped together, had, through a series of stock splits, mergers, and phenomenal growth in a sector I barely understood, blossomed. It had blossomed into a sum that made my breath catch in my throat. It was a substantial portfolio of shares, now worth, well, it was worth a fortune. A very, very significant fortune. Enough to buy 10 of my old houses. Enough to make the crazy granny one of the wealthiest women they would never know. A tremor went through me, not of fear, but of something akin to electricity. For the first time in months, the fog in my brain seemed to lift. This wasn't just money, it was a lifeline. It was power. It was a voice. My Arthur, my careful, clever Arthur, had unknowingly left me a shield and a sword. The despair didn't vanish, but a new feeling began to push through it, a flicker of hope, then a slow, burning ember of resolve. The label Crazy Granny echoed in my mind, but now it sounded different, less like an insult, more like a challenge. Perhaps I wasn't crazy for loving, but I would be crazy not to use this. The first seed of a plan began to germinate. It wasn't about revenge, not exactly. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming what was mine, my dignity, my life. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was about showing Michael and Serena the true cost of their cruelty. My first step was secrecy. I couldn't let Michael and Serena get a whiff of this. They still had power of attorney, and I knew Serena, especially, would pounce on this windfall like a shark sensing blood. I needed help, professional and discreet. I remembered Mrs. Albright, a retired legal secretary from my old church, a kind woman whose husband had been a corporate lawyer. She still lived in our old neighborhood. Getting out of Golden Acres for an afternoon required a cunning I didn't know I possessed. I feigned a sudden, intense interest in a pottery class offered at a community center a few miles away, something so benignly elderly that the staff, after a call to Serena, who likely dismissed it with an exasperated sigh, grudgingly approved my request for a taxi. Mrs. Albright was shocked to see me, and even more shocked by my story. Her gentle face hardened as I recounted the betrayal. "That girl, Serena," she said, shaking her head. I never trusted her smile. She listened patiently as I explained about Arthur's investment. Her late husband, it turned out, had specialized in corporate law and estate planning. She knew exactly who to call, a younger lawyer in his old firm, a Mr. Henderson, known for his sharp mind and discretion. Arthur always said, "Eleanor, if you're ever in a real bind, find someone who understands the wolves." But isn't one himself? Mr. Henderson is that man. Mr. Henderson was everything Mrs. Albright promised. He was in his late 40s, with kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor. I laid out the documents, my story, the power of attorney Michael and Serena held. He listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he looked at the Innovatech papers, then at the Global Core Dynamics statements. A slow smile spread across his face. "Mrs. Vance," he said, "your husband was either very prescient or very lucky. Possibly both. This is quite substantial." He then explained the legalities. The power of attorney was a problem, but not an insurmountable one. My mental state, which they had so callously impugned, would be the key. He arranged for an independent psychiatric evaluation with a respected specialist. "We need to establish, unequivocally, your competence, Eleanor. Then we revoke that POA, secure your assets, and you can decide your next move." The evaluation was thorough, but I felt calm. I spoke honestly about the grief and distress their actions had caused, but also about my clarity regarding my finances and my wishes. The psychiatrist, a kind woman named Dr. Ramirez, concluded I was perfectly lucid, suffering from understandable situational depression due to familial betrayal and displacement, but in full command of my faculties. Armed with her report, Mr. Henderson moved swiftly. The power of attorney was legally revoked. Michael and Serena were notified by a curt legal letter, which I'm sure came as a shock. They likely assumed it was a desperate, foolish act from the crazy granny, egged on by some new, equally foolish friend. They had no idea of the true scale of what was happening. Next, Mr. Henderson helped me consolidate my newfound wealth. We set up new bank accounts, a trust, all shielded from prying eyes. He introduced me to a financial advisor, a calm, unflappable woman named Sarah Chen, who specialized in wealth management. Sarah was brilliant. She explained investments, diversification, and long-term strategy in a way that made sense. For the first time in my life, I felt financially literate, empowered. I wasn't just Arthur's widow or Michael's mother. I was Eleanor Vance, a woman of considerable means, in control of her own destiny. During this period, I transformed. The despair didn't vanish overnight, but it receded, replaced by a quiet determination. I started eating properly, walking in the small, depressing garden at Golden Acres, focusing on the future. I even started observing Michael and Serena from a distance, metaphorically speaking. I knew their spending habits, their arrogance. Their big opportunity, I suspected, was likely another poorly conceived venture, or simply a way to fund an even more lavish lifestyle. Mr. Henderson, with a little discreet digging, confirmed my suspicions. They had invested heavily in a high-risk luxury property development, swayed by promises of quick, massive returns. They had also purchased a new sports car for Michael, and Serena was talking about a second home in a fashionable resort town. They were living large on the proceeds of my stolen home, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering on their horizon. My plan began to take shape. It wasn't overtly aggressive. I didn't want a public, messy confrontation. I wanted something more elegant. Something that would speak for itself. Sarah Chen helped me set up a blind LLC, a company with an innocuous name, Oak Tree Holdings. Through Oak Tree Holdings, I began to make strategic, quiet acquisitions. One of the first things I did, with a peculiar sense of detached satisfaction, was to instruct Mr. Henderson to find out if my old house, Arthur's house, was back on the market or could be bought. It wasn't, at that moment. The new owners seemed happy. But I kept it in mind. Instead, I focused on their current vulnerability, the luxury property development they had sunk my money into. Mr. Henderson's contacts revealed it was already facing financial headwinds, over-leveraged and poorly managed. Quietly, through Oak Tree Holdings, I began to buy up some of its distressed debt, becoming one of its significant, albeit anonymous, creditors. I didn't do it to destroy them, not entirely. I did it to position myself. The crazy granny was learning to play chess, and her opponents didn't even know she was at the board. I continued to live at Golden Acres, playing the part of the slightly confused, forgetful old woman. When Serena called, which was rare and usually to complain about the cost of my care, I would sound vague, sigh a lot, and let her think I was slowly fading away. The dramatic irony was a small, bitter pleasure. She had no idea she was talking to the woman who was steadily, methodically, dismantling the foundations of her precarious kingdom. It took about 6 months for the first cracks to appear in Michael and Serena's gilded cage. The luxury property development they'd pinned their hopes on officially stalled. Whispers of insolvency grew louder. Then, their primary investor, a shadowy overseas fund, pulled out. Panic, I imagined, began to set in. Mr. Henderson kept me informed. Through his discreet channels, he learned that Michael and Serena were trying to secure emergency funding, leveraging everything they had. Their lavish spending had, of course, continued unabated. They had likely assumed the profits from the development were just around the corner. One afternoon, a call came to Golden Acres for me. It was Michael. His voice was tight with a forced joviality that didn't quite mask the underlying panic. Mom? How are you doing? Serena and I were just thinking, we haven't seen you in a while. We should get together. I feigned mild surprise. Oh, Michael. That would be nice. Is everything all right, dear? Everything's great, Mom, just great, he said, a little too quickly. Just, a little, cash flow thing with the new venture. Nothing serious. But, Serena was wondering, that old jewelry of yours? The pieces Dad gave you. We were thinking, maybe you're not wearing them much anymore, they could be worth a bit. It could help us out, just temporarily. My blood ran cold, but I kept my voice even, slightly frail. Oh, my jewelry. I I'm not sure where it all is, dear. Things get so muddled these days. This was the opening. The moment I had quietly prepared for, yet dreaded in a small, maternal corner of my heart. Well, maybe we could come over, help you look, he pressed. We could take you out for lunch. Our treat. Lunch would be lovely, Michael, I said. But perhaps not here. Golden Acres is so dreary. I actually have a new little place. Much brighter. Why don't you and Serena meet me there tomorrow? Around 1. I gave him the address of a modest, but very respectable condominium I had recently purchased through Oak Tree Holdings, in a quiet, secure building downtown. It was comfortably furnished, a world away from Golden Acres, but not ostentatious. There was a surprised pause on his end. A new place? Mom, how? Oh, you know, dear, I said vaguely. Things change. I'll see you tomorrow. I hung up, my hand trembling slightly. The crazy granny was about to host a very interesting luncheon. The next day, I dressed carefully. Not in anything flashy, but in a simple, elegant navy blue dress. My hair, which had grown dull and lifeless at Golden Acres, was now neatly styled, thanks to a mobile hairdresser Sarah had recommended. I felt a calm I hadn't experienced in years. I wasn't Eleanor the victim anymore. I was Eleanor Vance, in control. I had arranged for a simple but delicious catering service to provide lunch. No fuss. Just dignity. They arrived looking harried. Serena's expensive dress seemed a little strained, her makeup a touch too heavy, betraying a sleepless night. Michael looked older, lines of worry etched around his eyes. They stared around the pleasant, sunlit living room of the condominium, their expressions a mixture of confusion and suspicion. Mom, this is nice, Michael said, though he looked thoroughly bewildered. How did you manage this? Serena was more direct, her eyes darting around, assessing. Eleanor, what's going on? Did you win the lottery or something? There was a sharp, acquisitive gleam in her eyes. Something like that, Serena, I said calmly, gesturing for them to sit. Please, make yourselves comfortable. Lunch will be served shortly. The meal was tense. They picked at their food, their attempts at casual conversation falling flat. Finally, over coffee, Serena couldn't hold back any longer. Eleanor, we need to be frank. Michael's business, it's hit a snag. A temporary one, of course. But we need a significant infusion of cash. Quite urgently. Michael chimed in, his voice strained. Mom, we wouldn't ask if it wasn't critical. We're talking about losing everything. I sipped my coffee, meeting their anxious gazes. Losing everything, Michael. Like I lost my home. My security. My peace of mind. A flush crept up Michael's neck. Serena bristled. Now, Eleanor, there's no need to be dramatic. We did what we thought was best for you. You were clearly not coping. Ah, yes, I said, my voice quiet but firm. The crazy granny defense. It was quite effective, wasn't it? It allowed you to take my home, control my finances, and relegate me to a place like Golden Acres without a second thought for my well-being. We were trying to help you. Serena insisted, her voice rising. Were you helping me when you sold my house and used the profits to fund your speculative ventures and lavish lifestyle? I asked. Were you helping me when you ignored my calls, my distress? Were you helping me when you told me my mind was gone? Michael looked down, shame finally evident on his face. Serena, however, was defiant. That money was an investment in our future. And you were becoming a burden. A burden, I repeated softly. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a neatly folded document. I placed it on the coffee table in front of them. This, my dears, is my latest bank statement. From an account you know nothing about. An account that Arthur, in his wisdom, set up many years ago. Serena snatched it up. Michael leaned over her shoulder. I watched their faces as they scanned the figures. Watched the confusion turn to disbelief, then to utter, slack-jawed shock. Serena's hand went to her mouth. Michael's face went pale. The numbers on that page told a story far more compelling than any words I could utter. The sum was astronomical, far exceeding anything they could have imagined. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by Serena's sharp intake of breath. This can't be real," Serena whispered, her eyes wide, fixed on the paper. "You crazy old, how?" "Apparently," I said, a small, sad smile playing on my lips, "this crazy old granny is considerably wealthier than you ever dreamed. Wealthy enough to live quite comfortably without needing to sell her son's soul, or her own home." I paused. "Wealthy enough, in fact, to be a major creditor in that luxury property development you're so worried about. Oaktree Holdings. That's me." The color drained completely from Serena's face. Michael looked like he was going to be physically ill. The full realization of their miscalculation, of my quiet power, hit them with the force of a physical blow. The dynamic in the room had irrevocably shifted. The crazy granny they had dismissed and discarded now held all the cards. They stared at me, no longer with condescension or impatience, but with a dawning, horrified respect. Their carefully constructed world, built on deceit and my money, was crumbling around them, and the architect of its deconstruction was the very woman they had tried to erase. The composure I maintained was a shield. Inside, a storm of old grief and new strength warred, but outwardly, I was serene. They, on the other hand, were utterly unraveling. The immediate aftermath of that revelation was chaotic, at least on their end. Serena, true to form, oscillated between furious accusations. "You tricked us. You set us up." And desperate, wheedling pleas for help. "Eleanor, you have to help us. We're family. Michael is your son." Her arrogance had shattered, replaced by a raw, grasping panic. Michael, for his part, seemed simply broken. He sat slumped, staring at the bank statement as if it were a viper, occasionally muttering, "I don't understand, how could we not know?" I let them vent for a while, observing them with a detached sort of pity. The vibrant, confident couple, who had coolly dismissed me months ago, were now reduced to this frightened, desperate, and utterly outmaneuvered. "There was no trickery, Serena," I said finally, my voice calm and even. "I simply used the resources available to me, resources you were unaware of because you never truly saw me as a person, only as an obstacle, or an asset to be exploited. You called me crazy. Perhaps the only crazy thing I did was to trust you both for so long." Their property development was, as I knew, teetering on the brink of collapse. As a significant creditor through Oaktree Holdings, I had options. I could have pushed it into bankruptcy, wiped them out completely. There was a certain grim satisfaction in knowing I held that power. But revenge, I was discovering, was a hollow prize. What I wanted was accountability, and my peace. "I will not bail you out of this mess you've created," I told them, my gaze steady. "You made your choices, fueled by greed and a shocking lack of empathy. You will face the consequences of those choices." I explained that Oaktree Holdings would act in its best financial interest, which might involve restructuring the debt, or even taking control of the development's viable assets. But it would not be a lifeline for their personal finances. Their sports car, their talk of a second home, their extravagant lifestyle that was on them. Serena began to weep then, messy, unattractive tears of self-pity. Michael just looked at me, his eyes filled with a dawning, agonizing understanding of the depth of his betrayal and its cost. "Mom. I am so sorry," he whispered, the words sounding choked. "I was weak. I let this happen. I have no excuse." It was the first genuine note of remorse I had heard from him. It didn't erase the pain, not by a long shot, but it was a flicker of the sun I remembered. "Your sorrow, Michael," I said gently, "is something you will have to live with. As will I, in my own way. The relationship we had is gone. Perhaps, one day, something new can be built, but it will be on a foundation of truth and respect, not deceit and exploitation." I didn't offer them a lifeline, but I also didn't twist the knife. I simply laid out the reality. Their financial downfall was swift and brutal. The property development did go into receivership. Oak Tree Holdings, under Sarah Chen's astute guidance, managed to recover a significant portion of its investment by acquiring some of the more promising underlying land assets at a fraction of their supposed value, which we would develop sensibly later. Michael and Serena, however, lost everything they had poured into it, which was essentially all the money from my house and any other funds they had managed to leverage. Their creditors came calling. The sleek black SUV was repossessed. The new sports car followed. They were forced to sell their heavily mortgaged, ostentatiously decorated house and move into a small, cramped rental apartment, a far cry from the luxury they had taken for granted. The social circle Serena had cultivated so assiduously vanished overnight. Michael, I heard through Mrs. Albright, eventually found a modest job, something far removed from the high-flying consulting he'd pretended to do. Serena, stripped of her financial power and social standing, reportedly became bitter and shrewish, their marriage strained to the breaking point. There were whispers of divorce. It was a harsh reckoning, but one they had authored themselves. Michael did try to reach out. He called a few times, his voice subdued, filled with shame. He didn't ask for money again. He just talked. Apologized. Expressed regret. I listened, mostly in silence. The wounds were too deep for easy forgiveness. I told him I appreciated his calls, but I needed time. Lots of time. Serena never called. I suspected her pride, or perhaps her unchanged nature, wouldn't allow it. My own healing was a slow, deliberate process. Leaving Golden Acres for my own comfortable, secure condominium was the first step. I began to reconnect with old friends, people I had drifted away from during the years I was consumed by Michael and Serena's endless needs. I rediscovered old hobbies: gardening, albeit in pots on my balcony now, reading, attending concerts. Sarah Chen managed my finances brilliantly, ensuring my wealth was not just preserved but grew, responsibly and ethically. I found a quiet joy in my independence, in the ability to make my own choices, to live life on my own terms. The ghost of the crazy granny still lingered sometimes, a reminder of the pain, but it no longer had power over me. It was a scar, a testament to a battle fought and won. I never moved back into my old house. The new owners were a young family, and I heard they were happy there, tending Arthur's roses. That was enough for me. Instead, with a portion of my wealth, I established a small foundation, the Arthur Vance Trust for Elder Dignity. Its purpose was to provide legal aid and support for seniors who found themselves in situations of financial exploitation or abuse, particularly by family members. It was a quiet way to honor Arthur's memory and to perhaps prevent others from suffering as I had. My work with the foundation gave me a new sense of purpose. I wasn't just managing wealth, I was trying to make a small difference. Life settled into a new rhythm, one of peace and quiet contentment. My condominium was filled with light, books, and the scent of the flowers I now grew. I traveled a little, saw parts of the world Arthur and I had always dreamed of visiting. I learned that true wealth isn't about the numbers on a bank statement, but about self-respect, security, and the freedom to live authentically. The betrayal by Michael and Serena had been a profound trauma, a shattering of my most cherished beliefs about family. But from those shards, I had, with Arthur's unexpected gift and my own rediscovered strength, built something new, something stronger. I often reflected on that confrontation, the moment Serena's eyes widened at the figures on that bank statement. It wasn't triumph I felt then, or now, but a deep, aching sadness for what had been lost, for the son I thought I knew. Yet, alongside that sadness, there was a profound sense of vindication, not in their downfall, but in my own quiet ascension. They had tried to erase me, to reduce me to a caricature of a confused old woman. But I had found my voice, my power, my worth, hidden in plain sight all along, just waiting for me to reclaim it. The crazy granny had proven to be far more resourceful, resilient, and indeed, far saner than they ever could have imagined. And in that knowledge, I found my peace. Thanks for listening to my story. It's not always easy to share such personal journeys, but I hope it resonates. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and please, feel free to share your own experiences or thoughts in the comments below. Your voice, your story, it truly matters. Remember that.